Hello, everyone, and welcome to our IEEE Young Professionals webinar series. Today, our webinar is actually part 5 of the personal finance webinar series we had going on this year. Stacey He is going to be talking to us about some cool investment and saving strategies. Of course, before we get into that, my name is Matthew Carius. I'll be your host today. With the webinar specialist with the MGA Young Professionals Young Professionals Board. I'm also the vice chair for the global board in terms of marketing and communications. In case you haven't known, we've been hosting monthly webinars, sometimes 2 webinars in a month on effective communication, leadership, personal finance, things that we think young professionals would like to know about. Please, if you have any questions, type any questions you have into the box below. You can upvote for questions, but we will probably be answering all questions at the end during, a 5 to 10 minute question and answer period. I'll be relaying those questions back to Stacey. In case you haven't known, we've been having free meetup events at global high-impact conferences throughout the world. These are free free for IEEE members around the world, including young professionals. The good thing is that you don't actually have to attend these high-impact conferences like Web Summit, CopCan, South by Southwest. You can just actually come to our free IEEE Young Professionals event and still actually experience these cool conferences around the world. So be on the lookout for that in 2016. If you haven't done so already, just connect with us on our multiple platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We have almost over 100 videos, including all of our webinars and snippets from those high-impact conferences I mentioned previously. Please, again, join us on our IEEE Collaborative community. We're actually revamping it in a way so that all our young professional events can show up on Collaborative. So hopefully that's going to be up and running in the new year. But before that, there's still lots of great material we've been posting on our Collaborative community. And today's webinar is Personal Finance Webinar Series Part 5. Stacey He has been doing a great job giving us any and all information professionals may know in terms of investment planning, saving, where to spend your money. Again, Stacey, thanks again for coming, and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Hi everyone. Today's webinar it's a very specific topic, and I thought I'd do this topic today because real estate is such a hot topic right now, and especially in Toronto and Canada, and really all over the world, right? It's never really off our minds, and I often get questions from young people asking me, should I invest in a real estate, buy a condo, or save this money and invest in the stock market? And just to give you a little bit of a background knowledge on the Toronto real estate market, if you don't know already, it's a hot market right now, right? The average detached home in Toronto is $1 million, so it's overheating. And so there's a lot of confusion, right, especially among young people, because if housing prices are over $1 million, a lot of times our starter home has to be a condo, and given how hot the condo market is, people are confused. Should I buy? Should I rent? And so today I'm really talking about this. The entire webinar is really on real estate, and I'm going to give you sort of my 2 cents on when I think it's a good idea to own versus renting, and also just kind of go through some misconceptions that people have when it comes to owning a condo. So just some background knowledge. I mentioned about the Toronto market. An average detached home is $1 million now. And keep in mind also, even though I am talking about Toronto, this is really all over the world, right? I mean, every country has properties, and we've seen the real estate high in the States and the crash in 2008. And so wherever you are in the world, this will apply to you at some point. Okay, so back to the real estate market here in Toronto. Average detached home is over $1 million. Most buyers in the Toronto downtown are actually investors, right? So these are people who buy a property during construction and then they rent it out to millennials, to young people, to immigrants, you name it, right? So this is the bulk of the market in the Toronto downtown, and these are the investors that are driving the prices up. Interest rates right now in Canada are at an all-time low, and they're not expected to increase anytime soon. New down payment rules, used to be minimum of 5% down payment when you buy a home, but now recently the rules have changed. They mentioned that if the house price is more than $500,000, a minimum 10% down is required, and that's basically it is put in place to cool down the market, right? And they're saying, if you buy a property more than $500,000 and you can't afford 5% down payment, you probably shouldn't be owning this property to begin with. So that's a tactic to cool off the market. But this is just sort of a background knowledge on what is happening in the Toronto market right now. So if we're put into the situation as a young person, your first property is most likely, unless you have help from parents and you come from a wealthy family, most of the time your first property is going to be a condo. And so today we're going to look at, well, what are the good and the bad, and how do we make that decision? So the good, I think this is pretty self-explanatory and pretty obvious, but I'm just going to go over it. You own a condo because people think that because you think you're building equity in the home, right? As the property value increases, you are increasing the value, your net worth is increasing. The equity is increasing and your monthly mortgage payments are actually decreasing, right? Because, well, it's not decreasing, it's the same, but it's reducing the principal of your mortgage. So that's the good. So you're building the equity. The bad is, on the flip side, is you have fixed mortgage payments. You have maintenance costs, taxes, fluctuating interest rates, and of course your cash flow is now restricted, right? Because you're locked into a mortgage payment. So these are the things that we know, right? This is what most people know when it comes to investing. But what I want to go through with you today are some myths that I think people have. So number one is, people tend to think that the real estate market have outperformed the stock market in the past few years, and I'm here to tell you that that's not true. If we look at real statistics, so let's say you have $50,000 to invest. So backtrack 10 years. In 2005, you had $50,000. If you had put the $50,000 in the condo market, and in the real estate market versus putting this $50,000 in the stock market, right, following an index fund. So it's just following the stock market. After 10 years, your stocks will be worth $109,000, and the condo, based on the price increase over the past 10 years, would have been $79,000. So if I look at the past 10 years, where real estate have gone up significantly, my stocks still did much better than they did had I invested in a condo, which is quite interesting, right? Because most people don't think that way, but because we don't look at the numbers. But if we really look at it, saying that a condo has outperformed the stock market is completely untrue. That's not to say a particular condo didn't do well, but if we look at the general average, this is the case, right? So that's myth number one. Myth number two, stocks are riskier than real estate. That's what a lot of people think, right? Because I don't know why, but people tend to think that real estate is a very stable investment, right? It's always going up, and that's what we've seen in the past. And I guess that's why we have that idea. But I want to bring the awareness to you that it's how you define risk, right? If you define risk as fluctuations, up and downs, then yeah, stocks are more risky, because every year, you could have a good stock or a bad stock, but the real estate is probably going up at 2% or 3% every year. But if you define risk as a permanent loss of money, right? So any given year you can have a permanent loss of money, then stocks are not any riskier than real estate, because we've seen 2008 and market housing prices have gone down more than 50%. So basically at the end of the day, if you define risk as a permanent loss in your investments, then stocks are not any riskier. And myth number three, which I think is the biggest myth that people have, which is renters are throwing cash away and owners are building equity. So it's a complete waste of money to rent, because you're throwing money into the wind. But the thing is, you can, as a renter and an owner, you can both build equity, but in completely different ways. To own a property, you need a down payment, right? And so the down payment acts as the equity for the property owner, while renters can use this money, this down payment, to invest in the stock market. And so if I have 25,000, I could put it into a condo, or I could invest in the stock market. If you're in the market, you can diversify yourself across geographic locations and industries, right? So you're diversifying your money across different places, whereas if you put the entire 25,000 in a condo, that's one asset, right? So there are some advantages and disadvantages for both, but you know, just because you're renting, it does not mean you're throwing money away. And I want to walk through with you an example, and I think with these numbers, it'll become a lot more clear in terms of should I invest or should I rent? So let's say a condo is 250,000. Okay, and you know, I've used of course, what can you get for 250 in Toronto? But the concept is the same. Okay, so follow through with me. So let's say the condo you want to buy is 250,000. It's a starter home. It's a 1-bedroom. You have 25% down payment. So that's 62,500. Closing costs are about 4,500, right? So that's lawyer fees and all those things. So you add those two together, total cost is about 67,000. If your down payment is if your down payment is 62,500 and the total cost is 67, the mortgage is about 185,000. You're going to have this mortgage for 25 years, and the interest rate right now, let's say, is 3%. Okay, so the breakdown of your mortgage is going to look like this. On a month-to-month basis, the mortgage is going to be $887 a month. Maintenance fees for a condo will be about $350. Property taxes about $150 for a total of $1,387. And so the total amount that you spend, the total cost of owning this property is essentially $1,387 times, let's say, for 5 years, right? So we're comparing the next 5 years. How much it's going to cost you to own a condo versus renting. So for 5 years, 1387 times 60 months, right? So that's 5 years, is 83,220. So it's going to cost you $83,000 for this condo. Rent, on the other hand, is going to be, let's say, $1,500 a month times 60 months, 84,000. So if we look at it from this perspective, the condo is not that much cheaper than renting, right? So let's forward to the next slide. Now, what happens if you see, when you invest in a condo market, it all depends on what is going to happen. Is there going to be a crash, or is it going to keep on going up? And given where the markets are right now, you know, a lot of people are saying, yeah, a crash could come, or maybe in the next decade. No one knows. No one knows. But if it does happen, right? So there are two scenarios. There are favorable market conditions and there's unfavorable market conditions. So in a favorable market condition is when, you know, the condo is the value of the property keeps going up. And so let's say the next 5 years, you're paying your mortgage payments, the principal would have been reduced by 17,000, right? So you would have paid 17,000 of the principal of your home. So that means that the mortgage balance decreased now to 168,000. So the total equity that you put in over the course of 5 years is the original 67,500. Remember, it was 250,000 at 25% down payment, so that's 62,500. Plus, over the next 5 years, you've managed to cut down your mortgage payment, the principal payment, by 17,000. So the total equity in your home is 79,500, which is 32% of the total house value, which is pretty good, right? If this person sells the condo, there'll be a net profit. I don't profile there, but the typing error. Net profit will be 25,000. So if the condo prices increase by an average of 2%, which is what it's been doing, the total value in 5 years will be the housing price, the market price of the condo will be 275,000. So if you sell the condo, you would net profit 25,000. Okay, so that's a scenario in a favorable market condition. Let's look at the flip side, which is if there was a market crash. If there was one, let's say your condo, you bought it for 250, it is now worth 212,000, right? Your mortgage at this point is 168,000. So the 212,000, which is the market price of the condo, minus the mortgage, is 44,500, which is now officially the equity you put into the condo. So compare that to the favorable market condition, which you've had, 79,500 as the equity versus 44,000, right? A difference of 30-something thousand. So a lot of people think that, you know what, I don't care how the market is doing. I'm putting money into the mortgage. I am therefore building equity. That's not true. You're only building good equity if the markets continue to do well. If the markets crash and the condo prices decrease, you're not really building equity, right? So for those of you who think that, okay, I'm buying a condo, there's no risk, that's completely untrue. It works. The risk is just the same as if you were investing in a stock market. And this is me being conservative in terms of the interest rate, right? I've assumed that the interest rate was, if you look at this slide, it was 3%. This is at a historic, it was 2 point something percent now in Canada, but this is at a historic low. Can we say that the interest rate will never increase in the future? Of course not. It will increase. That's a fact. And if interest rates do increase, let's say to 5%, suddenly the cost of owning a condo becomes significantly more than if you're renting, right? So when you are evaluating whether to buy a condo or not, there are 4 questions you should ask yourself. One being, will the interest rate rise? In Canada right now, it's an all-time low, so therefore, yes, right? It will rise. It will rise. Are condo prices going to continue to increase? We don't know. There may be a crash sometime in the future. Are equities doing poorly? They haven't been doing very well, especially in the past year, given what's happening in Canada with the oil and the oil crash, right? So the Canadian dollars are pretty weak now too. So are the equities doing poorly? Yes, but is it going to continue to do poorly, right? And number 4, do you have a sufficient cash flow every month to put aside minus after the net of mortgage payments and all that, you do still have money left over to invest, right? Because if you have all your money put into the condo, mortgage payments and everything, you are investing in one asset, right? And that's extremely risky. And so if you answered yes to any of these 4 questions, you should really evaluate whether it is the right time to buy a condo, because it just may not. So it's not, the answer is obviously, it's not obvious, and I don't have a yes or no answer, but I just wanted to bring the awareness to you that buying a condo is a sure way to build your wealth. Because it's not, right? And I see that misconception. Yeah, that's it for today. It's a short webinar, but I thought, I really wanted to focus on this topic because this was such a debatable area. And I'm, of course, opening the floor for questions, and because it's quite an interesting topic for myself as well.
Thanks, Stacey. Yeah, thanks, Stacey. That was great. So we are open for questions. So if you have any, please type them below. I really like how you actually went through each of the scenarios. So I guess in the end, what would you do right now?
In the end, what would I do? Okay, and I would. Okay, I'll say it this way. I would do it based on. Okay, here's how let me think about how I'm gonna word this. If I am not in a rush to buy a condo, so if you're not in a rush to buy to own, let's say you're not in a rush to own, I would not buy a condo right now. I will wait it out. I would accumulate more money to own a house, a property, a townhouse, something with land, because if there was a market crash, historically what happens is the outskirts of the city. So, for those of you who are in Canada and in Toronto and listening, there's the downtown Toronto core, there's the midtown areas, but then there's Mississauga, Markham, Scarborough, and all those places, right? So there was a market crash. Markham, Mississauga, Scarborough, Milton, Burlington, they're all going to get hit first, and they're going to get hit significantly. Whereas if you look at the core of Toronto and you look at, North Eglinton, Lawrence, York Mills, and those areas, they're not going to be hit as bad. And so if you ask me, okay, should I own outside of the city? My opinion is no, because that's what I believe, that the crash will happen outside first. And then in the condos, right? Because you don't really own anything in a condo. And
so why do you think the crash will hit suburbs first? If there is a housing crash, not just in Toronto, but any major city, why do you think it hits suburbs first?
If you look at the prices in the suburbs now, they are very expensive. And that doesn't make sense. That's purely a bubble, right? The reason it's expensive, let's say, by Eglinton, is because of the convenience. It's because you're at Yonge and Eglinton. You're in the middle of the city. You're close to everything. That's why it's expensive, because it's needed, right? There's a high demand for that location. Whereas Markham, it's it's not in the middle of nowhere, but it's far, right? And so what happens is when there's a market crash, you see the prices go down, right? So every house price will go down, but those who can afford it will suddenly buy in the core of the city. So suddenly increasing, so that means the crash in the core of the city is not going to be as significant because there's money being injected into the core again.
Right.
Do you see? Because given the choice between living in somewhere convenient versus outskirts of the city, I think most people would choose the convenience, right? But most people don't. But right now, a lot of people cannot because they cannot afford it, and that's why they go to Markham, Scarborough, and Mississauga. And so the reason being, it's a bubble over there. You look at in the middle of nowhere, and it's $750,000 for a house. It doesn't make any sense. So. If there was I would be very hesitant to buy it out there, and I'd be even more hesitant to buy a condo because it's expensive, and when there's a crash, those two things are the first to go.
Fair enough. So you talked a little bit about actually, a question coming in here about how renters, because I don't know, most young professionals are renters, should be saving their money and investing. As opposed to putting into a down payment. So how risky should that investment be compared to actually buying a condo or buying a property?
Right. It depends on. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So like basically, should like how risky should that investment be instead of putting it into a house?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it comes down to how long do you want to hold the investment for? So if you have to ask yourself, is this money to be used for the long term? Because if it is, if let's say it's for 10 years, right, or something even longer, then you can invest it quite aggressively, and you're young, so you can invest it quite aggressively. So you could do maybe a third in the Canadian into the Canadian equities market, a third in the U.S. market, and a third in the international market. That's a good mix because it's all equities, but you have a long timeline, so you can afford to be quite aggressive with it. However, if you say, I need this money for vacation, and I'm just or something short term, and it's going to be 2 or 3 years, then that is a terrible mix, right? You got to invest very conservatively, and then maybe you're looking at bond funds or maybe a little bit of equity and mostly bonds. So it really comes down to how long you plan to hold this money for. So anything less than 5 years, you should invest it quite relatively safely, conservatively, and anything longer than 5, in the 7-10 year mark, should be it can be quite aggressive.
Perfect. Yes, that's actually some pretty good advice. We have one more last question coming in. It's about the U.S. Like, what's your take on? I know you talked a lot about Toronto. I guess if there isn't a possible bubble, would you give the same advice for if you're not in Toronto or if you're not in a metropolitan where there is potentially a housing crisis? Would you give the same advice, or would you suggest buy earlier rather than later?
So post a bubble, so let's say a bubble happened and prices have gone down, then my advice changed in the sense that I would jump in and buy immediately if I have the money, right? Because you're buying a property at an all-time low. If it's just an average price and it's not really a bubble or anything, it's just a normal market. It depends on what your cash flow is like, and then you don't. I think my stance is I would own a property not to invest, but also I ask myself, if there was a market crash, am I going to be okay with it? That's the question that I ask myself. So if the answer is yes, as in, I don't need to sell it for cash, I don't really care, I'll just ride the wave, then yes, go ahead and buy a property. If the answer is no, if the answer is it's going to give you a heart attack, you need the money, and then the answer is no. So it all depends on this question. If there was a market crash, would you care? If you don't care, then you can invest in your property. And also, though, take a look at your cash flow. You bought a property, you take a look at what your mortgage payments are going to be and what the condo fees and all those fees are at the end of the month. Are you going to have any money left over for investments? If you don't have a single dollar left in investments and everything is going to a condo, I am more hesitant to go down that route, because how do you know it's not about, like, no one knows truly, right? And real estate is not a bad investment. It's just, it has to be a portion of your total investment. So if you have some money left over, so that the key is not to buy a place that you're stretching yourself financially. So the key is to have some money left over every month that you can also use to invest. Then you're in a perfect condition to buy, right? And I would recommend you to buy it. Yeah, you would own a condo or a property, and you're also investing in the market. It's the best of both worlds.
Perfect. Well, thanks for that webinar, and thanks for all the awesome advice you've been giving us. It's always a pleasure to hear what you have to tell the young professionals. Thanks for that.
Absolutely.
Well, so just to wrap up, thank you all for participating. Please complete the feedback survey, which I'll be sending out within the hour. Our next Young Professional webinar is something a little bit different. It's going to be January 28th, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Marty Schindler is going to be talking to us about technology in Hollywood, and he's going to be talking with on a panel with our chair, Mario, actually in Hollywood, in LA. So it should be quite exciting. Please check out our new career-based services for young professionals, our IEEE Mentor Center and Resume Lab, which we'll be revamping in the new year. And of course, if you have any suggestions or for other products and services, please shoot us an email. And from that, I'd like to thank Stacey once again. Again, great advice like she always gives. And thank you all for participating. And have a good rest of the day. Thank you.